This year marks the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, a legacy born in turmoil, uncertainty, and nearly insurmountable odds. 2.5 centuries ago, thousands of citizen soldiers answered freedom's call. At a moment when tyranny tried to dim the spirit of an emerging nation, our first heroes forged an institution whose strength, sacrifice, and enduring resolve have come to define our republic. The Army's story begins in the spring of 1775. 1 month after the Massachusetts militia humbled British regulars at the battles of Lexington and Concord, America's colonial leaders assembled in Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress. The meeting had been called to address long-standing grievances with Britain's imperial government. But the recent bloodshed at Lexington and Concord fundamentally changed the purpose of the gathering. Until then, many colonists had hoped for reconciliation with their mother country. It was increasingly clear that freedom would not be possible without war. The reasons for a united resistance were growing. Among other offenses, the British Parliament had earlier passed the Intolerable Acts, which had closed the port of Boston to all trade, forced colonists to house and feed British soldiers, and restricted the colonists' right to public assembly, allowed British officials to be tried in England instead of the colonies, and effectively put Massachusetts under martial law. In April of 1775, they fired on American colonists. By the end of May 1775, Patriot leaders were calling up militia in all 13 colonies. They stockpiled guns, ammunition, artillery, and military supplies. Some militia units drilled every day. The battles of Lexington and Concord proved that Minutemen could push back British forces. Those early battles also proved that the colonies needed a united fighting force with a clear chain of command. Mindful of the perilous road ahead, the delegates to the Second Continental Congress debated establishing an army. Letters from citizens in Massachusetts were read aloud before the assembly, recounting British acts of tyranny and calling neighboring colonies for assistance. As the Provincial Convention of Massachusetts wrote in a letter to the Continental Congress on June 2nd, quote, "We tremble at having an army established here without a civil power to provide for and control them." Having received reports that British troops would soon arrive in great numbers in New York, the Continental Congress directed that if the British were to commit hostilities and invade private property, the inhabitants should defend themselves and their property and repel force by force. Ultimately, the delegates decided they had only one path forward. It was time to create a national army. On June 14th, the Second Continental Congress voted to establish the Continental Army. The official record read, "Resolved that 6 companies of expert riflemen be immediately raised in Pennsylvania, 2 in Maryland, and 2 in Virginia, that each company consist of a captain, 3 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, a drummer or trumpeter, and 68 privates. That each company, as soon as completed, shall march and join the army near Boston, to be there employed as light infantry, under the command of the chief officer in the army." The message to the British was clear. This was not a regional outbreak of violence. It was a unified act of defiance. The colonies intended to join together to defend their freedoms and, if necessary, to fight for independence. The very next day, the Continental Congress unanimously appointed George Washington of Virginia as Commander-in-Chief. The Congress wrote, "We, reposing special trust and confidence in your patriotism, valor, conduct, and fidelity, do, by these precepts, constitute and appoint you to be General and Commander-in-Chief of the Army of the United Colonies, for the defense of American liberty, and for repelling every hostile invasion thereof. And you are hereby vested with full power and authority to act as you shall think for the good and welfare of the service." That same day, Massachusetts leaders discovered that the British planned to occupy Boston's Charleston Peninsula. On June 16th, General Artemus Ward sent Colonels Richard Grindley and William Prescott with about 1,200 soldiers to fortify the summit of Bunker Hill, overlooking Boston Harbor. The soldiers labored through the night to build a defensive barrier. By early morning, they had erected a strong earthwork position and were joined by New Hampshire Colonel John Stark and his troops. As the sun rose on June 17th, the British noticed the Americans occupied the high ground. The British ships opened fire but could not reach the hastily constructed American positions. British Major General William Howe ordered his troops to assault the hill. The fierce battle that ensued was a tactical victory for the British, but a painful and costly one. The British sustained twice as many casualties as the Americans and pulled back to Boston, where American forces encircled them. American morale was high, and men streamed in from towns and farms volunteering to join. On July 3rd, General George Washington traveled to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to assemble his officers just off the central yard of Harvard College, where he formally took command of the Army. The next day, he wrote, "It is hoped that all distinctions of colonies will be laid aside, so that one and the same spirit may animate the whole. And the only contest be, who shall render on this great and trying occasion the most essential service to the great and common cause in which we are all engaged." Washington then began building the new army. His task was not just about assembling men willing to fight, it was about shaping the character of the men who would forge this new nation. Courage alone was not enough. Washington worked tirelessly to instill good order and discipline, secure supplies, and institute rigorous training to produce soldiers who could fight toe-to-toe with the British Army, then the best army in the world. Washington wrote, "Discipline is the soul of an army. It makes small numbers formidable, procures success to the weak, and esteem to all." As the army took shape, each battle told a story of audacity and sacrifice. Washington won his first victory at Boston in 1776, but suffered heavily at Quebec. When the British returned that year to New York in full force, the army fought doggedly from Long Island to New Jersey. Washington's army suffered heavy casualties, but never giving up. With winter setting in, General Washington did the unthinkable. The bold Christmas night crossing of the Delaware River in a blizzard, and the subsequent victories at Trenton and Princeton turned the tide of the Revolution and proved to the world the unbreakable spirit of the American patriot. These battles were more than military engagements. They were seminal moments that gave birth to our nation. Every volley fired, every battle won, and every sacrifice paid moved our nation one step closer to the promise of self-determination and freedom. Today, as we celebrate 250 years of the United States Army, we remember that the greatest victory ever for liberty, sovereignty, and independence was won by ordinary people. The gallant soldiers of Washington's Continental Army answered the call of liberty and rushed into battle not only for their own freedom, but for ours as well. Their story defines us all. It tells us what we stand for and who we are as a nation, born through the sacrifice of our first heroes who gave their lives for the greatest experiment in self-government the world has ever known. Today, every soldier who dons the uniform guards that sacred legacy, ensuring that the ideals of freedom, duty, honor, and country continue to shine brightly for the whole world to see. The heroes of Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill are not long-forgotten ancestors. They are brothers in arms, standing to the left and to the right of us in our formations. To this day, the courage of the Revolutionary War soldier and Minuteman beats in the hearts of every American soldier. These individuals strive every day to build a future that embodies the extraordinary spirit of our nation's very first citizen soldiers. As defined by George Washington in 1775, when he said, "When we assumed the soldier, we did not lay aside the citizen." The formation of our Army is a testament to the power and enduring spirit of a people determined to secure their destiny of liberty. As your Secretary of Defense, I am profoundly grateful to every individual who has served, from the courageous patriots of the American Revolution who won our freedom to the soldiers currently serving around the world, defending our Constitution and way of life. Today, on this momentous 250th anniversary of America's Army, let us honor the legacy of those who came before us by committing ourselves to building a future worthy of their sacrifice. May we always remember that in our unity there is strength, in our courage there is hope, and through our service there is an unbreakable promise to defend freedom for all. As we celebrate this rich history, I invite you to reflect on the enduring spirit that began humbly in 1775, a spirit that, against all odds, forged our nation's independence, freedom, and liberty. This spirit remains the backbone of our nation today. No matter what challenge we may encounter, this spirit will propel us into the future with unwavering resolve. Thank you for joining me in celebrating our shared heritage. God bless you. God bless the United States Army. Godspeed to our warriors. And God bless America.